Olá, eu sou Eduardo Toledo, membro do Conselho Consultivo do BIM Fórum Brasil. Estamos aqui para mais um webinar do BIM Fórum, dessa vez em parceria com o associado Alvarez e Marsal, para falar de um tema importante, VDC, os 5 componentes que garantem o resultado dos projetos, para ajudar a moderar essa sessão. Eu convido o professor Sérgio Schir, também membro do Conselho Consultivo do BIM Fórum. Schir.
Obrigado, Toledo. Bom, é um prazer estar com vocês e, inicialmente, eu gostaria de agradecer muito a ajuda da Estefânia com essa live, esse arranjo da Alvarez e Marsal, que é uma associada do BIM Fórum Brasil, e da vinda, né, do professor Martin Fischer para conversar um pouco conosco, ele sendo diretor do SAIF em Stanford, que é o lugar onde nasceu a ideia do Virtual Design and Construction, que seria projeto de construção virtuais. É um enfoque interessante, importante, que junta os elementos que a gente conhece do BIM, de técnicas de engenharia simultânea, de processos outros de gerenciamento, de gestão, olhando para os objetivos dos projetos em si e do cliente. Bom, já dei os 5 componentes, mas vamos assistir isso com a Estefânia e depois com o professor Martin Fischer, num vídeo que ele gravou gentilmente, e ele volta para conversar conosco numa sessão, um debate, um Q&A, de perguntas e respostas. Então, VDC é, de fato, uma estratégia de gestão de projetos, de empreendimentos, de ativos, de construção, diferenciada e muito usada mundo afora. Vamos aprender um pouco hoje sobre isso. Toledo? Seu som.
Microfone fechado, professor.
Então, deixa-me então apresentar as pessoas que vão ajudar a gente a conhecer um pouco mais sobre o VDC. Primeiro vai falar a Estefânia Correia, que é engenheira civil, formada na Unicamp, com 12 anos de experiência, sobretudo em obras de infraestrutura. A Estefânia é graduada em administração de empresas pela FGV e é certificada e mentora em Virtual Design and Constructions pela Stanford University. É mestranda lá do nosso programa Construir Nova. E também nosso convidado ilustre de hoje, professor Martin Fischer, da Stanford. O professor Martin Fischer é professor da Escola de Engenharia de Stanford, professor na área de Engenharia Civil e Ambiental, é o diretor do SAIF, que é o Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, que é um centro muito antigo, muito renomado, da Universidade de Stanford, e também ele é Senior Fellow do Precourt Institute for Energy, que é um instituto que se dedica a questões de sustentabilidade. Além disso, é membro da Royal Swedish Society of Engineering Sciences, é Senior Fellow do Design Features Council e é membro da National Academy of Construction, certamente um dos professores da nossa área, dos mais importantes e relevantes. Então vamos lá, Estefânia, abra os trabalhos.
Vamos lá, então, pessoal. Prazer estar aqui com vocês, professor Sérgio e professor Toledo. Obrigada novamente pelo apoio que vocês deram para a gente aqui, né, para nós da Alvarez falarmos um pouquinho sobre como a gente tem trazido isso para os nossos clientes. De novo, um prazer enorme estar aqui. Espero contribuir aqui para o conhecimento de todo mundo que está acompanhando. Vamos lá, então, vou passar a apresentação. Primeiro, começando sobre quem é a Alvarez e Marsal, né? Acho que é importante a gente falar um pouquinho sobre a companhia, né? Então, nós somos uma consultoria, tá? Americana. Então, o headquarters brasileiro é justamente a área de infraestrutura e projetos de capital. Nós já somamos 6 mil profissionais aí pelo mundo, somos 700, esse número aí está crescendo muito aqui no Brasil. Já temos uma história aí de 38 anos, sendo desses 15 aqui. E a gente está em 4 continentes, em 26 países, também em expansão, abrindo escritórios aí de infraestrutura e projetos de capital, da prática de infraestrutura e projetos de capital, liderados pelo Brasil, pelo pessoal aqui do time do Brasil, em outros países, tá? Como é que a gente gera resultado? Então, a gente busca fazer um paralelo entre a experiência, né, entre a experiência dos nossos profissionais e método. Então, a gente traz bastante método para a mesa, né? A gente não faz somente entrega de PPT, por exemplo, a gente traz, impõe a mão na massa, esse é um diferencial da nossa consultoria. E a gente traz profissionais, obviamente, né, gabaritados aí nas principais metodologias, justamente para trazer essa experiência para os nossos clientes. Em se tratando de experiência, né, a gente fala muito de pessoas e certificações, né, então a gente valoriza aí as nossas certificações, as certificações do nosso corpo técnico. Então, aqui estão algumas delas, né, é claro que a certificação agora de Virtual Design and Construction, ela é também uma dessas que são valorizadas, né, então a Alvarez, obviamente, para trazer conceitos, né, novos de consultoria do que tem rolado aí mundo afora para os nossos clientes, obviamente a gente precisa conhecer e ser certificado nessas metodologias. Então, aqui estão algumas delas, né? Muitas certificações em gerenciamento e gestão de projetos, né? Infraestrutura, finanças, né? Toda essa parte aí de gestão como um todo e parte de controle. Né? Mais certificações também voltadas especificamente à construção, né? A gestão de empreendimento de construção também é sempre bem vista. Principais clientes, então vocês podem ver aqui que nós temos clientes de várias áreas, né? De vários tipos aí de empreendimentos, né? Então são owners, né? Principalmente de vários tipos de indústrias. Né? Aqui mais alguns, né? Então destaco a MRN, né? Até CPFL, Furnas, a Companhia Brasileira de Alumínio, enfim, né? Duratex, são clientes bastante aí representativos e que trazem aí a nossa robustez, né? Em relação ao método, né? Eu falei da experiência, das certificações, né? E agora eu vou falar um pouquinho de metodologia. Essa é a nossa mandala, né? Então a gente fala sobre diferentes temas, né? E alguns campos dessa mandala são bastante mescláveis, por assim dizer, né? Então a gente fala de IPMO, né? Que é justamente a gestão dos projetos, a parte de estratégia de capital, excelência, né? Na implantação dos projetos, segurança, né? Então, Project Assurance, a gente fala de Strategic Construction Solutions, disputas, e aqui mais focado, né? Aí com mais ênfase no que a gente veio apresentar aqui, justamente a parte de Digital Asset Management, que é liderada por um diretor nosso aqui também, que é justamente para a parte de operação e manutenção, né? Dos ativos dos nossos clientes. E a parte de Digital Capital Projects, né? Que é justamente para trazer digitalização e inovação para esse tipo de projetos, né? Dentro do pilar Digital Capital Projects, vou apresentar um pouquinho mais no detalhe para vocês, a gente tem esses produtos, né? Então, a gestão digital, né? Então, onde a gente traz aí práticas, né? De gestão de projeto focada na digitalização, tá? Roadmap tecnológico, então a gente faz um diagnóstico de como está a integração dos processos dos nossos clientes, né? Como é que as informações transitam, quais softwares usam, como isso está em relação aos benchmarks que a gente traz aí, né? Falei que a gente está em vários países e a gente tem condição de fazer benchmarks internacionais, então a gente faz essa comparação entre a situação, o mapa de softwares, né, dos nossos clientes versus as boas práticas internacionais. O Virtual Design and Construction, né, que nós estamos trazendo aqui, então, dando suporte não só para treinamento, preparação e implementação de soluções, considerando a metodologia, soluções focadas em BIM, né, então, o professor Sérgio Tira aí já deu um spoiler para nós, né, o BIM é um dos componentes que leva a sucesso, então a gente faz também implementações focadas em BIM. Inteligência de dados para implementação de dashboards, então, justamente estruturar, ajudar na estruturação dos dados dos clientes, para que eles possam ter uma gestão mais visual, né, com o uso de Power BI, né, toda a parte de Power Automate, Power Apps, enfim, Suite Microsoft. E inteligência artificial e machine learning, que é justamente uma vez que a gente tem esses dados estruturados, a gente conseguir fazer análises aí preditivas, né, dessa massa de dados aí, quando a gente fala de inteligência artificial, por exemplo. Bom, aí eu vou falar um pouquinho sobre o VDC na Alvarez, né? O que a gente faz, né? Então, é justamente trazer para os nossos clientes, né? Esse apoio, né? Vocês vão ver na palestra do Martin, né? Da importância de definir objetivos claros e mensuráveis. Então, a gente apoia os nossos clientes na definição de objetivos claros e mensuráveis no ponto de vista do cliente, quanto no ponto de vista do projeto. utilizando o BIM como uma fonte de informação, e sessões colaborativas para dar velocidade à resolução dos problemas. E a gente tem um outro pilar, que é justamente liderado por um outro diretor nosso, uma outra área, que é de Lean, né? Então, a gente alia todas essas coisas justamente para dar uma abordagem aí mais holística e mais integrada para os projetos onde a gente está inserido. Né? E aí a gente fala muito da prática, né? De trazer imersão, de trazer outros conceitos de realidade virtual, por exemplo, né, para esses projetos, enfim, são projetos aí bastante diferenciados. Bom, com relação à nossa parceria com a Stanford University, né, então a gente também já vem conversando com eles há um tempinho. A Universidade de Stanford, ela é reconhecida, obviamente, né, por ter aí pesquisas, né, de ponta em relação ao uso de blockchain para controle de medições, por exemplo. Essas são as linhas de pesquisa que são aí valorizadas, né, e desenvolvidas pela universidade, avaliação e uso de robôs, otimização de logística de estoques, a própria realidade virtual e a aumentada que eu acabei de comentar, o desenvolvimento de algoritmos para facilitar a criação de gêmeos digitais, otimização, então, de projetos utilizando machine learning, inteligência artificial, enfim. Então, essa nossa parceria com o Stanford visa justamente a gente ter mais um contato, né, e mais opções aí de networking com essas empresas que também fazem parte do Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, né, que justamente, e é um motivo de muito orgulho aqui para nós, sermos também, né, além de membros do BIM Forum, sermos membros do SAIF, né, no último mês a gente efetivou essa parceria. E, de fato, o SAIF, ele é um pouco diferente de alguns centros de pesquisa, justamente porque ele visa desafiar os seus membros, né, as empresas que fazem parte, trazendo visões, né, de futuro, né, e levando esses clientes, então, a uma posição de liderança, a uma posição de força no mercado em que eles fazem parte, né. Então, a Alvarez é um membro com acesso a todos os benefícios do SAIF, né? Então, a gente vai para o Industry Advisory Board, a gente vai para o Technical Advisory Committee, né? A gente faz parte disso, né? Então, a gente consegue direcionar o foco de pesquisa do laboratório. A gente vai para o Summer Program, que é justamente um evento aí próximo, né? Em setembro desse ano. E a gente vai para o Industrialized Construction Forum, que é o próximo evento aí em fevereiro do ano que vem. Falo já sobre a visita do membro da comunidade acadêmica, né? Obviamente, a gente tem a parceria com o BIM Forum, né? Não estaria aqui se não tivéssemos, né? Onde a gente tem ali também alguns benefícios, né? E a nossa logo, a nossa marca já sai hoje. Se vocês entrarem no site do SAIF, a nossa marca já está lá. Então, isso só corrobora e foi motivo de muita felicidade aqui para nós, quando a gente viu que a gente já estava ali efetivado como membro. Outras associações, a gente também é membro da ACE, né? Então a gente faz parte de todas as discussões da ACE e do CII também, do Construction Industry Institute. Além disso, né, a gente fechou uma parceria com o Stanford Center for Professional Development, o SCPD, que é justamente para a gente capacitar o nosso corpo técnico e os nossos clientes em VDC. Né? Então, além de ter acesso aí a todo o ambiente do SAIF, a Alvarez vai ser capaz de fornecer certificados VDC aos nossos parceiros, né, aos nossos colaboradores. Então, a gente vai montar ainda para esse ano turmas, onde a gente vai capacitar na metodologia, né? Então, o curso ele vai seguir os estándares de Stanford, né? Então, vai ser ali, né, uma semana introdutória, os relatórios vão ser mensais, a gente vai fazer um acompanhamento com os participantes sobre a implementação do VDC. Vamos ter um midterm workshop, né, que é ali, obviamente, né, no meio do curso a gente faz uma parada e avalia como estamos indo. A Integration Experience, que é justamente um fechamento desse programa ao final, e aí vai, então, culminar com um certificado E&M Powered by Stanford, cujo modelinho vocês podem ver aí do lado. Então, também é um motivo de muita gratidão, de muita felicidade de trazer isso para vocês. Nós estamos divulgando isso hoje em primeira mão. E a gente vai lançar esses programas ainda esse ano, no segundo semestre. Então, eles ainda estão em preparação. Aqui estão as pessoas que estão nos ajudando. Obviamente, o professor Martin Fischer, que vai estar aqui com vocês já. Ronnie, que é a pessoa que coordena todos os esforços em relação a esforços educacionais de extensão, né, em Stanford. e o Raul, que é um mentor também peruano, um mentor sênior peruano, que está com a gente também fazendo essa ponte, né, e trazendo esses conhecimentos para nós. Então, super feliz de estar divulgando isso para vocês hoje. Aqui, só então, para fechar a minha apresentação, a gente tem um case de projeto portuário, onde a gente aplicou o VDC, né, um projeto Alvarez, né? Então, a gente tinha ali como objetivo do cliente justamente um aumento de capacidade, tinha um pier ali que precisava, um berço que precisava ser construído, né, para atracação de navios, e justamente para ter o início da operação desse berço na data pactuada, né? Então, a gente fala muito de objetivo do cliente, não vou entrar muito na teoria aqui, porque vou deixar para o pai da metodologia falar. O objetivo do projeto, né, era justamente a gente ter uma redução de custo, redução de prazo, né, através da redução de desperdícios, né, usando de fato, então, o BIM, as reuniões de engenharia simultânea integrada, que são as reuniões ICE, e o PPM, que é o Project Production Management, que tem muito dessa mentalidade Lean, de reduzir variabilidade e tal. E aqui do lado a gente tem as métricas de produção e os fatores controláveis, porque, obviamente, o que a gente não consegue medir, a gente não melhora. Então, esse é talvez o sexto elemento, né, o anexo, que não pode faltar numa implementação de VDC. Então, esse aqui é um exemplo de um case, né, onde a gente teve, de fato, a redução, né, através de um estudo de eficiência, né, dos equipamentos, do almoxarifado desse projeto, né, uma redução de 16% na frota de equipamentos, né, porque a gente otimizou não só o layout que vocês podem ver no meio, mas também o uso, né, consciente, inteligente dos equipamentos ali dentro. Então, a gente conseguiu reduzir os equipamentos e aumentou em 26% a área de produção. Tá? Então, são alguns dos resultados que a gente obteve nesse projeto. Em consequência de uma melhor organização no almoxarifado, a gente ganhou também um aumento de 40% na eficiência da balsa. Então, por ser um projeto portuário, a balsa é um equipamento crítico, então qualquer coisa que a gente conseguir de ganho ali é direto ganho na veia, né? E isso, por fim, né, todo esse estudo gerou um aumento de 43% no ritmo de produção de pré-moldados. Tá? Então, esses foram alguns dos benefícios que o VDC trouxe para esse projeto. E com ele, eu termino a minha apresentação aqui, né? E vamos passar para a apresentação do professor Martin Fischer.
Muito bem, vamos então ao vídeo. O professor Martin vai estar presencialmente conosco para responder as perguntas, mas decidimos gravar um vídeo com ele, inclusive para fazer a legendagem, para ficar mais confortável para todo mundo por conta do inglês. Vamos lá.
Hi, I'm Martin Fischer. I'm a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University, and I direct the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering there. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you about virtual design and construction, which is a method to manage projects that my colleagues and I put together about 20 years ago, because we saw the need to create a project management method that allows project teams to create good results on projects, always reliably, and that leverages emerging management methods and technologies. So I will talk to you briefly about the history of virtual design and construction, and I will share what it is, of course, and explain what benefits companies have received from applying virtual design and construction, and what best practices I see around the world. So let me go to the slides to do that. So I titled this talk Virtual Design and Construction, VDC, generating great results reliably, because I see project teams wanting to do that all the time, of course, but not always succeeding in spite of their very hard work. And I have to thank all the companies in the past and the current members of SciFi that have allowed us, through their funding and access to their projects and knowledge and leadership, to create new methods for creating better projects since 1988. And also from Brazil, I'm very happy that Alvarez and Marsal is a member. But as you can see, many other companies support us, building owners, engineering and construction companies, and technology companies, because this is, of course, a very big task for our very important industry. And it takes really the input of all of these parties to create a change that is long-lasting and impactful. So in my mind, really the big problem that VDC addresses through the virtual part, right? Because the virtual part allows us to do things before we actually do them physically, while we can still make changes and improve the project without costs that are quite as dramatic when we build it. So I think the main challenge is that traditionally, the different disciplines that create a building or a road or other project that we build come into the project sequentially. But of course, in the building itself, everything has to work together. So in my experience, this sequential engagement and this sequential consideration of all the disciplines, all the constraints, all the objectives that the project has to achieve does not lead to a predictable and great result. Because we find that everybody tends to work in their silos of objectives, silos of information, and silos of workflows or processes. And VDC tries to overcome these limitations of today's way of delivering projects by creating a common view of the project through the virtual tools and methods, by creating more effective processes, and by creating better targets for the project team to achieve through improved collaboration. But let me explain how this all works. Because we have found that this current way of method leads to quite a lot of waste. So you might wonder, what does this number 54% stand for? A few years ago, we studied what engineers in a world-leading company, engineering company in San Francisco were doing. How were they spending their time? And in the study, we found that indeed they did spend, I believe it was 38% of their time designing, doing engineering. You might say, well, that's crazy, because it's an engineering company. Why do they only spend 38% of their time engineering? And they spend, what do they do the rest of the time? They spend 8% of the time planning their work. Okay, that's something you need to do too. So now we are at 46% of the time. So here is the remaining 54%. The 54% of the time was spent dealing with information, finding information, organizing information, storing information, finding it again, comparing different sets of information, and so on. So the information management was more than half of the time that this engineering company spent. Of course, we have to work on information management. Without information, we cannot do anything. But this was really a wake-up call. And I think it is because of these silos and this constant need to have to check each other's information, etc., that we have to spend this much time. So personally, I got motivated to work on something like VDC from the experience on one of my first projects. I was working for a company, VSL, post-tensioning company, in the US, but it's a Swiss company. And I was redesigning these bridge girders so that they could be built on land, floated in place, and lifted up. And as I was a young engineer, and I thought, well, surely, for such a project, the contractors would have given input about how to build the project to the designers. And designers for such an important project would create a design that can be built. And that information would be available when you need to do your work. And that there wouldn't be too many conflicts between the different sets of information. And that we would all pursue the same goals. Well, I had to learn that this was not the case. And I also sadly had to learn that this project was not an exception, that there were many projects where these things didn't happen. But with VDC, we have seen all of these things happen that I imagined as a young engineer would be possible, that obviously are beneficial for a project when they happen than versus when they don't happen. So I want to start with the original definition and ambition for VDC, which is still a bit of an ambition, as you will see. But 20 years ago, together with our colleagues from Strategic Project Solutions, we formalized virtual design and construction as the management of integrated multidisciplinary performance models of design construction projects, including the product, the buildings, roads, etc., the things we build. Work processes and organization of the design, construction, operation team in order to support explicit and public business objectives. So I know that's a lot to take in, so but let me explain here the aspiration. We saw, because of the importance of information and emerging technologies, we saw an opportunity to create simulation performance models of our projects. That includes schedule performance, cost performance, energy performance, whatever performance you're interested in. Of course, they have to be multidisciplinary. And because they're applied on the same project, they have to be integrated. This is, of course, not a practice that we had at the time, and certainly and don't necessarily have quite yet, but are moving towards today. And our project, of course, consists of the things we build, the product, how we build them, the people, and the work they do, the organization and processes. And of course, we have design, construction, and operation phases. So they all have to be considered and supported. And we have to be clear on what we want as an outcome. And those objectives have to be explicit and public. So hopefully that explanation helps a bit. And so let me now explain how virtual design and construction is used and seen today in a little bit simpler terms, but I wanted to start with our official initial definition, which is still an ambition we have. So VDC, virtual design and construction in a nutshell. It's first and foremost, of course, to support us, because without the right team, without good people, it's difficult to be successful. So I often hear, right, it's all about having the right people. And I agree, but I would say in addition to having the right people, you also need a few more things to be truly good. Because in 2022, right, even the right people can only do so much without tools. We see this in everyday lives. When we have tools, we can achieve much more than when we don't have tools. And this is, of course, the same on our projects. And the tool that is particularly important, but we need other tools, but a tool that is particularly important is BIM, building information models. Here shown for building, but also applicable for a tunnel and anything we build. Because our clients buy a product from us. If you are a project manager in a client organization, then you have clients like your users, etc. in the organization. They depend on the product, the road or the plant or the building that you are delivering. And the same for architects, engineers, builders, and subcontractors, and so on. So we create a product for our clients. And that's why it's crazy to build in 2022 a product that doesn't use a BIM where everything that we build is represented. It's entirely possible. And so we should do it. But the best tools and people will only achieve so much, or will not achieve much actually, if they're working in a poor workflow. So we need good processes, right? We need a good workflow. Here, for example, we see a workflow that was used on a public hospital project in San Francisco, where the design and construction team sat down and mapped out the process, and they realized that it actually had a gap. What the left diagram, the left diamond, the right diamond shows is how far the design team thought they're going to take the design. And the right diamond shows the level of completion that was expected by the builders. Of course, that wasn't going to turn out well, but because they mapped the workflows and shared them with each other, they realized this gap early in the project and could fix it. So now they had good tools, good people, and good workflow. And one more note here about workflows is the kind of entrepreneurial people we have in construction, they will much more likely follow a workflow on a project when they have created it together. And this is a practice we see, of course, more and more around the world. Now, also with digital tools, this picture is a few years old, just to show you that this practice has existed for some time. But it's very important for the people to stand together and work out the process together and make the commitments to each other in front of each other. But the best people, tools, and processes will not achieve anything unless they're focusing on the right objectives, right? If you're really efficient in doing the wrong thing, that's maybe not so good. So we need to establish and track project and client objectives. And this is surprisingly difficult in my experience of having taught visual design and construction to well over 2,000 people on all the continents. It's not a practice, a culture we have to establish quantifiable project and client objectives and make them public and track them and see how we're doing against them. So here you see how they did that actually on the same hospital project that I just mentioned in San Francisco a few years ago. So voila, this is VDC. And we have organized it in these elements. The collaboration, the people part. We call it integrated concurrent engineering to highlight the importance of integrating the different disciplines. Engineering means finding solutions. That's really the point of engineering. And concurrent is important to get out of this long, sequential, slow way of developing projects to bring the different disciplines and the knowledge they have together concurrently at one time. That needs to be supported by good information. BIM is a key tool here, but we're seeing other technologies emerging as well that are critical here. So BIM is really symbolizing here the need for high quality information that the project team uses, but also creates. Supported by project or connected with project production management, because we have to produce a project in design, in the virtual phase, and in the construction phase, and in the operation phase, we have to make improvements and run the facility well. So we found the term project production management the best term to bring all of the attention to process into one place. And as you heard, we need to establish project objectives, what the project team needs to achieve by the end of the project when the client takes over the project and starts using it, and client objectives, the kind of objectives that really give rise to the need for the project, because that's why the client is building the road, or why the client is building the bridge, or why the client is building the office building, or whatever the project may be. So we conceptualize VDC in this framework with objectives at the top, supported by people and how they collaborate, information they create and use, and the workflows and processes to follow. So VDC combines quantified objectives, timely and real collaboration, good information, and clear processes. If you can say that that's what you have on your project, well, then I guess you have VDC. But you have to really be honest with yourself and say, is our information really good? Do we really have clear and good processes and effective and efficient processes? Is our collaboration, are we really collaborating? Or are we just saying we're collaborating? Are we really upfront in finding problems early and collaboratively finding solutions to them? And do we really have clear objectives? I will explain this a little bit more. But here I want to introduce VDC, sort of explain what it is and what it means. Or briefly put, VDC establishes what you want to achieve, with whom and how. Digitalization is a big theme today, and it fits very well with VDC, already through the word virtual. But in the simple points, right, we want to achieve results on projects. For that, we need a project team to achieve that. The project team needs data and processes. So is another view of VDC. So hopefully one of these views of VDC will speaks to you. So you might wonder, okay, what have project teams achieved? Here's a few examples from around the world that I think are quite remarkable achievements by project teams. For example, one of the first projects that used VDC from the beginning with intent, where everybody said, yes, this is how we will work. It was a private hospital project in California, and there was the first hospital in the United States where the client got the entire scope on budget with the quality desired, 30%, actually over 30% faster than the previous similar hospital. Or a factory in Nevada was designed where the project team designed and built 325,000 square meters of flexible factory space in 10 months. Design and build, not just build. And or sports facilities in Peru, where a team led by COSAPI created the Pan American game facilities a few years back in 18 months. Olympic level sports facilities, amazing achievement. Or a public hospital in California, where the project team reduced the budget by 100 million, from 850 to 750 million, without sacrificing scope and delaying the project. That was also, I think, quite a great achievement. Or at a sort of little bit more detailed level, on an infrastructure project in London, they achieved a rebar cycle time, meaning detailing, fabrication, delivery, installation of 1 week. This was quite helpful on the project because then they could connect the off-site work with the on-site work much better, because they needed only 1 week visibility. Or laboratory building in Switzerland, where they resolved 80% of all the issues in one 45-minute eye session per issue. This created great reliability on the project, right? Because you knew when there was an issue, you could resolve it. The team had learned how to deal with it in 45 minutes. Okay, it took typically 2-3 days to schedule such a session, but still, it was a much, much more rapid resolution of issues, not having hundreds and hundreds of things in play at any given time. On a production plant in Norway, where they built the most sustainable and productive production plant of its particular kind on budget and schedule. Really dramatically higher performance without sacrificing budget and schedule. So all of these projects used VDC. And so if you like some of these achievements, maybe you should give VDC a try. So let me explain also a bit what the best companies do with VDC that others typically don't do. This will also give you an idea of how is VDC a little bit different, more systematic than other typical practices. So on VDC projects, the team insists on defining clear client and project objectives. They don't start until it's clear what needs to be achieved. I mean, it's part of the project. I guess you could say they don't start with design really in detail unless this is clear. Of course, these things can change over time, but again, when you're clear with them and have the whole project team on the same page, you will have much more chances for success. They assemble the project team with the expertise to achieve the objectives from the start of the project. But this is something I see quite often. Project objectives are established, and then we go back to hiring a traditional team, where some objectives are represented in the expertise that is initially on the project, and others not. And then they fall by the wayside. Team would collaboratively establish the workflows to be followed. Ideally, not from scratch, but from some templates, workflows that you know typically work. They use the generation of digital models as the key mechanism to build trust, mutual support, and proactive problem identification and solving before building the project physically. So they really engage in the virtual part of virtual design and construction. Right, without trust, without the right people and without them trusting each other, it's difficult to do something. But what is the strategy we use to support the right people and to make it likely that they trust each other? And I found when you build a shared digital representation of the project, you have a much better chance of creating that trust and then having good information and being successful. They go very rapidly from a conceptual BIM to a fabrication level BIM. They don't sort of waste a lot of time. Once they know what needs to be done, they just go and do it. And they use all of the VDC elements together. They don't just focus on process or lean or BIM or one of the other silos. Those by themselves are helpful, but we have seen when you bring all of these parts together, you are much more successful. So let me very briefly explain each of those. So insist on defining clear client and project objectives. What we found, as I mentioned, in projects around the world, that client objectives are often missing or unclear. So we see statements like this: the building needs to be flexible. We want to have good quality. Well, yeah, of course, there's no argument, right? But then we don't really know what it means. How do we know when we're done? So we need to be much more precise. So for example, we should say, what does flexibility mean? It means that a floor can be reconfigured from single offices to open area in 1 week. You know, I understand you might have a different idea of flexibility, but now it becomes much more clear what it is that flexibility really means, and then you can see whether your design actually achieves that. Or in terms of quality, you might say fewer than 1% of the construction work hours will be spent on rework. Or you could say 98% of the inspections are passed the first time. Now you have something you can measure, you can see we achieved it. And so let's do that again on the next project. Or we didn't quite get it, what do we change to become better? So insist on clearly defining client and project objectives. Now you have these objectives, right? Now we need the expertise to achieve them. So assemble the project team with this expertise. Yeah, the owners have a role here, right? And sometimes I see owners, they say, well, that's not my problem. I hire these people to do it. Well, in the end, it is your project, Mr. Owner. So you should be engaged in it, right? So we have seen much, much greater success when the client works together with the project team, as also Henry Ford put it. There is different ways in achieving that. One way is a shared contract. This was used on this hospital project, the private hospital project that I mentioned as a success a little over 10 years ago in California, where the client said, I want one hospital that works together. So why do I have separate contracts for the same project with the different parties? I want to just have everybody in the same contract. But we have seen other ways of achieving this kind of integration of the expertise you need to achieve your project objectives. This is just one way to do it. So don't say, well, I can't do this integrated contract, so I can't use VDC. I simply want to illustrate one way of creating this integrated team. We have seen other mechanisms like having workshops to bring the team together, but really workshop, not just talking to each other about how to work together, but actually working together and solving issues on the project. So there's different strategies you can use to create a team that addresses the objectives that you have set. So collaboratively establish workflows to be followed, ideally from templates. Edward Deming put this, I think, quite nicely. If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And my experience is, I have to say that if I ask project teams to draw the process, it's rare that everybody draws the same process. So this is a very, very useful exercise to see how you really are going to do the work at the detailed level. And it demands some attention. So if you've already seen this slide, of here, project team establishing how they're going to carry out a project to be successful together. Because it's kind of obvious, right, that we want results, but for that we need a process, and for that we need data. And if we don't have a process, we can't have data, and we can't have results. So in my experience, there's the next big thing that needs attention on projects is right, establishing the objectives, I highlighted already, but then creating the workflows, the processes together is absolutely vital to have a chance for success. Then, as you know, we need to have trust in each other on a project. Otherwise, it's difficult to be successful and to have some fun. So I've seen the generation of digital models really as a key mechanism to build trust and mutual support, proactive problem identification, solving problems before we get into building the project physically. So for example, here during the pandemic on a wastewater treatment plant in San Francisco, design construction team used VR. They sent headsets to everybody's home office, and then they could really work together. Here in particular case, a maintenance review by the maintenance staff and the design team and the construction team, or here a design review where they brought quite a large group of people together to update everybody on the status of the design, get everybody's feedback and input, and everybody could see who was there, what they could see. This proved to be really quite successful, and there's an example of how digital information, building digital information, brought the team together, created better basis of information for the project team, created more trust, and a much better chance for success. We've also seen lately practice on successful projects to go very rapidly from a conceptual BIM to a fabrication level BIM. So for example, the fabrication building that I mentioned, the factory that I mentioned at the beginning, the 325,000 square meters of flexible factory space, that was the first Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada. And there, one of the parts that led to the success was that they very rapidly went from a conceptual BIM to the fabrication level BIM. So Tesla was surprised, heavily surprised by how many orders for Model 3 they got, but then they realized, oops, we need to now really create the capacity factory to build it. And so the project team ordered the steel for the heavy steel on day 48 after they got the project, which was after the Model 3 launch. And their strategy was to decouple the gravity and lateral framing. This is earthquake country, so this kind of stuff is important there. It's always important, but really important there, so that they could order 90% of the steel as soon as possible, and then create a lateral system that requires smaller pieces of steel, a little more design, that could then still be made on time. So they broke ground on day 86, they put the first steel up on day 116, and they had the MEP design on day 155, and they turned over to the client on day 310. So 10 months for design and construction of very flexible factory space. And as I said, a key part was they spent a few weeks with the conceptual model to get the overall strategy for the project right. And then they very quickly directly jumped to the fabrication level, because they said anything in between doesn't really help us. We need to have fabrication level. We have to have certainty of information so we can build fast. We cannot afford any kind of mistake here, because we don't have time for rework. We just have to build it right the first time. And for that, we must take care of having good information, exact information. And so here you see a glimpse in the office, everybody working together from the client to the designers to the builders, so that they could address any kind of issue problem very, very rapidly. And here you saw a shot shortly of the factory. That's just a small part of it, shortly before the client could get in with installing its process equipment. And then finally use all the VDC elements together, get out the lean, BIM, and other silos. So here I want to share the example from Kosapi. That was really a remarkable project on a global scale, in terms of the quality of the facilities that was built and the speed with which were designed and built. So the client, right, wanted to host great games for athletes from 33 countries and 39 sports. So it had to be absolutely top-notch Olympic level facilities. And the project team had to deliver them on time for the games to start. So there was no time expansion possible, obviously big reputation risk. So these were some of the key objectives. So here's an example of what an ICE session looked like, right? You see a group of professionals from different disciplines working together to concurrently, immediately, right then and there, address the most burning issues. So this was really a key part of the success of the project. They had 50 ICE sessions in 10 weeks, so 1 per day. A 2-hour session, they solved typically 15 critical issues per 2-hour session. This is quite a good production, I would say. And typically there was about 10 team members involved: architects, project managers, BIM consultants, design and subcontractors. So this takes, of course, quite a bit of design, has to be embedded in the process workflow, connected to the information you need, and the objectives you want to achieve. But then it's super, super effective. BIM, they modeled everything in BIM. They had 60 models. They worked mostly at level of development 300, but then eventually they took it to level of development 400, the fabrication level, where you see all the details. They solved 3,000 issues during design with no construction impact. They had 10 major uses of BIM, and 90% of the project staff used BIM. So it was an essential. It wasn't like, okay, the BIM guys are over here. No, this is how we work. This is really absolutely key. And then PPM, just an example of processes. They created the process to collaborate with the designers in England and Peru in terms of using the cloud and common data environment. So they had work sessions, ICE sessions. ICE sessions can focus, of course, on the building that you create, but also on how you're going to work or on the objectives. And so they had ICE sessions to develop the procedures to align all the project participants so that everybody would understand and be behind these workflows. And just a few impressions here of how these workflows were created and then eventually formalized and then used, and things got measured over time. So hopefully you've seen here with these examples some of the key distinguishing factors that I've seen VDC teams do around the world that I don't experience on non-VDC projects so much. And all of this is really made possible due to leadership, or requires leadership at the company level and leadership at the project level. So I've seen project team being successful actually in spite of whatever contract they're having, because they said, we simply just have to create a great project. And how do we do that together? Because I cannot do it myself as an architect. Yes, I'm important. I cannot do it as the builder. I cannot do it as a structural engineer. I cannot do it as the client. Nobody can do it on their own. So we have to work together. And there is, when the project team and their corporate managers recognize that and see that, and then step up and become leaders, I have seen everybody else follow. When they really lead by example, when they lead with vision and purpose, then we can create these great projects. But that alone, of course, just the vision, etc., is important, right? But then you need a method to actually execute that gives you results, and that's what I hope you could see in this presentation. That's what virtual design and construction offers you. So I hope that you've come away with an understanding of virtual design and construction, what it is, what project teams have achieved with it, and what some of the key differences are to typical ways of doing projects, so that you can recognize when you're on a project whether you are actually using virtual design and construction. Now, I look forward to answering your questions, and always happy for your feedback and also for your success stories on your projects. Thank you.
Good. So, thank you, Professor Fischer, Martin. It's an inspiring presentation that you gave to us. Thank you. And we have some questions already in the YouTube channel. Maybe Marcelo can put this for us, please. And I would like to ask you, the first question is mine. What about the production metrics in this number of VDC implementations around the world? I know that you are gathering this and making some research on it. Can you comment it?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Sergio. I think this is an area where we, meaning all of us collectively, need to make progress. And let me illustrate why. When we studied the VDC implementations, I don't know if you probably may know that we run this professional VDC program where professionals learn the VDC concepts and then apply VDC to their projects, and we give them feedback based on reports they submit. And when we looked at the production metrics used by about close to 600 professionals in Latin America and Europe mostly, we found something like 1,300 different metrics being used. And then we cleaned them up a bit and still ended up with 500 or 600. It's still too many, right? And of course, many are quite similar. So I think as a community, we need to come together and decide at least a few metrics that we want to track about collaboration, about BIM use, impact of BIM, on processes themselves, so that we can talk with each other about the performance of our project teams. We can improve the performance of our project teams. We can develop tools and methods to measure these metrics, right? Because today there's still a lot of manual methods to measure that. It's really kind of strange, right? That we live and die with the performance of our project teams, and we don't have a good language to talk about it. We don't have metrics that we consistently use, right? Improve upon. It's kind of crazy, actually.
Great job. Too many, but we have to take at least 10. Maybe
something like that. I mean, it'll probably be the list will be a little bit bigger. I always think we can
choose a dozen, maybe.
But once we use, I mean, in your car, you pay attention to some of the metrics and in other places, right? And certainly, if you were running a manufacturing company, you would pay attention to a lot of the metrics, right? What's our inventory level? What's our work in process? What's etc. Yeah, many process-related metrics, production-related metrics we would care about. We should know, and some projects do know, but how many times has the BIM changed? Why? How many attributes are there correctly? How many are incorrect? I mean, this is basically simple metrics that we can think of many more interesting ones.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Ricardo Alexandre, sorry. Can you understand Portuguese? Let me translate for you.
I don't think so. let me get this one and make it more general. By the way, hi, Martin.
Hi. Well, good to see you.
Martin, the Brazilian version of ISO 19650 has just been published, the first two parts of this standard. Okay? Well, these ISO standards deals with the information requirements, yeah? Mm-hmm. But of course, to get to this, the client needs to have clear objectives, for example. Mm-hmm. So what do you think is or will be the impacts of this standard to VDC practice? Do you think it will help? I think there's some link between the ideas.
Yeah, and I have to rely on others that in practice with VDC, for example, Peter Bo Olsen from Denmark, that has studied 19650 quite carefully and basically says, yeah, no, this is very supportive of the VDC practices. He was quite happy that the 19650 standard, as opposed to some other efforts I see in other countries, in some countries, right, where basically the information management standards solidify old-fashioned practice of incremental treatment of information, etc. Right. So 19650 seems to be much more
supportive of basically VDC practices. Yeah.
This will make the clients think about what they really want and
so. I mean, the way I broadly
to get the information requirements a step further, but you have this.
Because some people have asked me, like, what's the sort of difference between VDC and BIM? And one way the way I look at it is you need good information management on a project, right? And so BIM and related to 19650, they make it more likely that you have good information management. But let's not confuse good information management with good project management. So good information management is an important part of good project management, but is not all of it. And so I'm a little bit confused when people are confused by the difference between good information management and good project management. And good information management is core to project. It's also shouldn't be at the side. It shouldn't just be, as I mentioned in the with the case in Kosapi, where like was really part of this is how we work. It's not like, oh yeah, we have BIM guys over there, they take care of that. No, it's part of the project. So I think if you still find yourself in a place where the good information management isn't really integrated into good project management, you need to work towards that. And 19650, I think, is a perfectly good way to do good information management.
Thank you.
So we have some questions from Miriam Ador. Sorry, there is another one from Ricardo Alexandre. What about lean construction and VDC?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for us, this was always integrated. And honestly speaking, if I'm really blunt and direct, we probably would not have developed VDC if I'd seen 20 years ago attention to digital methods by the lean community. And now, of course, there's much more there, but at the time I didn't see it. And that didn't make sense to me because it was pretty clear that the future was more digital. And for me, the two are extremely connected. For me, they were never separate. They were connected in many ways. For one, from the lean perspective, it's about flow, efficiency, reduction of waste, really understanding processes, production, and taking uncertainties, variability out of the equation. And VDC, and if you go back to the topic of BIM as part of VDC, is a big, BIM just creates certainty of information. So variability related to information much less. So the lean people should be super interested in that. The definition of metrics reduces variability because we are on the same page and so on. So VDC is really designed to reduce the variability on projects so that you can have a reliable delivery. From the digital side, it's kind of crazy to not think of lean approaches, not use a pool method. Just creating just-in-case information is not really, in most cases, not going to help you. It's might make things actually worse. So really having a lean mindset as you develop your BIM, for example, is really critical. So those are some of the key connections that I see. We can probably come up with more, but anyway, this should be enough, I think. So in a nutshell, if you're doing lean without BIM and digital, I think it's crazy. And if you do BIM and digital without lean, I think it's equally crazy.
Good. Thank you. We have a question from Miriam Ador, the first girl that has a certificate from VDC. VDC certified girl.
In Brazil.
Let's see the question, please. She's asking about the evolution for data transparency when you are dealing with metrics established for a project, how to deal with this, with transparency or data transparency, let's say.
So in terms of the so I think it's a matter, in my experience, a matter of leadership and practice, of really working with the metrics. So where I've seen really successful applications of metrics and transparent information is where the project leadership, and meaning, say, if you take a building, it could be different protagonists on other kinds of projects, but if you take a building, the client, the architect, and the general contractor, at least in the sort of model here. In other countries, again, different parties have bigger or smaller roles, but they together establish the metrics that they want to see. You probably want to see every other week. And then those metrics get displayed in some public form, and they are not just sort of eye candy on the wall. The people there actually use them. And so again, there the leaders have to pay attention to them. They have to review them. They have to ask questions about them. They have to expect improvement. So those are the two key components I've seen in successful projects, that the successful projects do differently or better than the ones where a few people say, yeah, we should have metrics, well, we should be more transparent, etc. But then if there is not the leadership from the main parties and the sustained use, people will stop paying attention. Was that the direction that your question was, or did you have intended it in some other way?
I think it's okay. I guess Stefania chose one. This one, yes, okay. Would you like to translate, Stefania? The time?
This is kind of a lesson learned. So about integrating the teams, what was or what is the highest difficulty and lesson learned that is the most important across the projects?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first is really, a question that probably merits a little bit more attention, and we should, when we are together at Stanford, hopefully we can develop a richer answer, but sort of on the spot, the first is that everybody on the team has to have the mindset that they don't know everything. So people have to admit to the things they don't know. And that doesn't always come easy, in my experience, to all the people in construction. At least for people with Germanic background like I have, that's not an easy thing typically. But if you are not, right, if you're not open and say, I don't know this, but we need to know it, then it's difficult to collaborate. When everybody tries to show that they know more than the other party, and when you have that kind of mindset, which I see on some projects, then the collaboration becomes, and the integration becomes really, really difficult. But when you have this openness, sort of some vulnerability, it's not that I don't know anything, but there's many things I don't know, and Stefania knows much better, and so together we can be much, much more effective. I would say that's really key mindset that's important. The other thing that, another thing that was really well summarized by a project manager at Disney when he learned about VDC and brought VDC to his projects. He had 30 years of experience of being on projects, and many of those managing projects. And after a while into his first VDC project, he says, wow, this is really interesting. The problems we find together, we solve together. So the problems we find together, we solve together. He said he was so used to a world like, Eduardo, by next meeting, you figure this out. Stefania, you figure that out. Sarah, you figure that out. And then you go away and do your thing, and you come back. And by the time you come back, the problem has changed somehow. Some new things have happened, so your solution is only half relevant anymore, and we do it again, right? I don't know if that's the world you know. That's the world I know. on many projects, sadly. But when you find the problems together, they just solve them right away on the spot. So creating space to find problems and being open to find problems, articulate problems, is another important part in terms of enabling good collaboration. And then the third is that's where I do see a very mutually reinforcing relationship between, say, BIM and the trust and collaboration. The other, to collaborate, you need respect and trust. And I've seen that trust being created. I haven't seen a method that creates trust faster than when you solve problems together, but then when you ask for innovative solutions and people actually work on them and create, say, a BIM or 4D model or whatever, the visualization that shows the solution, and share it, and people see, oh, this guy, Stefania isn't just talking about stuff, she's actually really doing it, and she's actually following up, and she's actually has good ideas. And so when you have this transparency of information, back to the previous question really also, then I've seen trust being built much more quickly, and then you have much more integration of the team. But I think having a mindset that is open to what you don't know and space to find problems and articulate them, and not say, well, why do you bring up this problem, Stefania? We hired you to solve problems. Like, that's your problem. Come on, take care of it. When you have that kind of style, then collaboration will not work.
Okay. I guess we have another question from Miriam. In your experience, in her experience in Brazil, it's difficult to have data direct from the construction site. Do you have any suggestions to improve this?
So there's some technology that is promising here. I really like the IoT crane hook from Versatile that tells you what the crane is doing every second. And so now you have facts of what the crane is doing. Okay, there's more happening on the construction site than what the crane is doing, but it's a very good baseline in terms of facts, what's happening, No, you did have the material at that point, etc. Or indeed, there was a problem with the delivery materials, for example. And so technologies like that, I know they are emerging, but I think they will improve and access to data. The same with robots. We have studied 20 robots over the last few years and applied in 8 different countries with 15 different GCs. These are production robots, like drywall robots, drilling robot, rebar tying robots, things like the painting robots and so on, scaffolding, erection robots and so on. And the data you get is amazing, right? All of a sudden you have data on what goes on. And then there is also, of course, other reality capture methods, although there, I think we still need to work based on the feedback I get from people on projects. They see some benefits, but then the quality and the speed is not always there yet in terms of actionable information. So that's one strategy that quite a few companies are pursuing actually now quite aggressively. Because they, I think, see the value of a consistently of information that's collected in a consistent way. The other aspect is to bring the lean practices to a daily level. So do your PPC every day. Establish how to really track PPC and the reasons for it, and look at the variability of the PPC from day to day. If you look at it weekly, it's probably not good enough. Then you will be behind. So bringing, and some projects are doing that, and I think they feel like they have much more access to information from site, connection with the site, and control. So those are two suggestions. One a little bit more emerging. The other one you could start to do tomorrow if you wanted to, in terms of,
Can I?
I was actually just going to say, please, Eduardo, I don't have to monopolize the session here.
I was just about to add something here, because sometimes we know that robots can bring us lots of data and structured data, which is really good. But I sometimes see that people are not prepared to the amount of data they get.
No, they're not.
So how to analyze it?
Sometimes, I have not found a single site that is ready for the information that they actually are getting now. The data is just sitting there. And we're talking very, very innovative people that really want to do something with data.
Mm-hmm.
So we're lacking still the methods of actually handling the data. I agree with you, Stefan.
Mm-hmm. And that comes to the PPM thing that we've just discussed it. How to establish the data treatment that leads us to the right decisions, right? And the other thing I was about to say was that you've mentioned PPC. Do you think, and this is my point of view, that when we are applying VDC to the engineering phase, should we do the PPC calculation daily, or should we adapt to a weekly PPC in terms of the developing or the time involved in engineering activities? This is something we've been discussing a lot.
Yeah, so the question was about site, so that's why I said daily. On site,
Yep.
daily, I think works best. In engineering, I'd say it depends, would be the right answer here. Because when you are, sometimes in engineering, you are at an extremely critical phase when a lot of things has to happen and a lot of different people have to be in sync and work together, and then you probably have to do it daily. Then there's other phases when that might be a little bit overkill. Right? I agree, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a question from Vinicius Alves de Lima. Let's try. So about VDC development, which one of these three columns, integration, BIM, and PPM, are the most sensitive one? Why?
Can you help me what is meant by sensitive? Sorry.
Oh, more, let's say,
critical, important,
critical,
difficult to implement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there the opinions vary, right? Some people say, well, without people and collaboration, we can't do anything. And yeah, can't really argue with that, right? Others would say, well, if you don't have good information, what the heck can you do, right? Without information, you cannot do anything. Without good information, can't do anything good. And then others would say, well, if my workflow is messed up, then, I'm not getting where I need to go. Or then, then the metrics. I mean, I would say I would include the metrics here. If you include the metrics, then I would probably choose the metrics, right? Personally. The other, it depends a bit. I would again say depends. The most general answer that I would say would have helped on most project teams, but again, it depends on the starting point, would be the focus on the quality of the information. Because once you establish facts on your project, once you establish this practice of good information, reliable information, people quickly realize, oh, wow, this works better when we collaborate. Now we can collaborate better. We can change the workflows now. We have good information. Wow, look, we can do this, we can do that, right? Because without the good quality information, you need a lot of collaboration and a lot of processes to deal with the poor quality of information. That's why I'm making this comment. But as I said, I wouldn't say this is the answer that applies always. But in the absence of more knowledge, I would counsel you to that, but only after you've established clear objectives.
Good.
Can I add something here as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with me, Marty, but sometimes we see that people have difficulties when establishing the workflows. They're not used to have the right workflows or how to think following workflows step by step, and what's needed, what's the inputs needed, what's the outputs required. So I think that as BIM is more common, if I would say so, and iSessions include collaboration and working with people and solving problems, and people if they don't do it, they know what is expected from them. When we talk about PPM, things get a little bit darker. So I think that from my perspective, again, PPM should be not the most sensitive one, but the one where people have more difficulties in implementing. Would want your comments on this.
Yeah. No, I mean we also see challenges of people actually defining clear metrics that are helpful and that they can measure and so on. But you're right. Drawing a process and talking about a process for some reason doesn't come easy to most of the people that I know in our industry, and that's doesn't matter whether it's in Brazil or Switzerland or California or Singapore. Yeah. So it's something we should get better, right? And because obviously, if you all know what happens, I think you've been on too many projects, everybody, where everybody had their own process, right? We talk about silos, and typically we talk about information silos, but it occurred to me the other day, wait a minute, there's like silos of information, there's silos of objectives, there's silos of process, right? And yeah, so there's which we have to overcome to create great projects.
The lack of communication.
And
so we have a question in English from Marco Antonio Ligardo. Thank you. Already translated.
So, do you want to translate it to Portuguese or how it's always?
No, Marco already.
Well, yeah, so I wouldn't say VDC is, I mean, it includes tech, but I wouldn't call it a tech solution. But a quick side comment. So when the client is not yet, the client doesn't seem to want to get it, I would first be very selfish and just say, well, what's in it for me? What can I gain? If the client doesn't want to benefit, I mean, there must be something that I can benefit or we can benefit. So I would start there. And often the client actually eventually notices them, and they won't be part of the party. And at least that's what I would do instead of trying to convince the client to get into VDC. The other thing that has worked with some project teams is to pick one or two production metrics to focus on where the client has a role. So this was very successful for a project manager from a large engineering company on the East Coast a few years back. He, at the beginning of the project, talked with the client, and he was a senior project manager. He talked with his counterpart, said, yeah, excited to work together on this project. You have many years of experience. What are some things that we as consultants do that bug you, that annoy you? Would be good to know that now, so we can make sure that we don't do that. And so the client had some ideas and some thoughts there, and then the client said, well, actually, now that you ask, are there some things that we do as clients that you've noticed on other projects that are sometimes are not so productive, not helpful? And he says, well, the one thing that would be really, really good to know from you is how quickly will you answer our questions? Of course, we would answer it quickly, but it's actually important to know, if we know we get an answer in a certain time window, we can plan for that. If it's variable, like sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, then that becomes a problem. The client says, oh, I see, yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah, no, I can guarantee you that we will answer all your questions in 30 days or less. Okay, great, thank you. And so 6 months into the project, it was a big, long project. They met again, and the client said, so how is it going? Isn't it nice that we're answering, all the questions now so quickly? And then the senior project manager goes, Well, it's funny you should mention that because, actually, yeah, you're not answering that quickly. He showed him the data. I said, many questions get answered in 60 days, 90 days, some even 120. Oh, that's a problem. Let me fix it. So he got, the client then, got more and more into VDC, right? Through the metric that they had established at the beginning would be good to track. But if you don't establish that at the beginning, then first of all, you can never show those metrics to the client, right? Well, you can, but I wish you luck with that conversation. But are you now? I didn't hire you to be my policeman, right? Will be the answer, most likely. So you have to establish that at the beginning, and then I've seen the opportunity then to get the client into VDC through a metric that he felt also, or she felt, yeah, no, that would be good to know. So those are the two approaches I've seen work for other project teams.
Good.
May I ask a question, Shirin, before?
Yes, of course.
Martin, we've brought people from Stanford before here to talk about VDC, Leonardo, for example, and some other people. And I think this concept is very little known in Brazil. My question is, have you witnessed a confusion about what VDC means? I mean, if you take the name literally, it can mean a much more general thing. And in my experience, people not aware of Seifel's work think that they know what VDC means, but in reality, they don't, because the name is so general.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're
the
right.
name is not virtual design and construction, sure.
Yeah.
Or something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I guess we need to pound the table more on that, what it is. I mean, we wanted a sort of simple, when we created it, we wanted a simple term, and it's been, the good thing about it is that it has stuck, but it also gets misinterpreted or misunderstood in too narrow a way. Because as you saw from the presentation, we really see it as the way to manage projects. And the virtual is, the keyword, that's why it's the first word, because it opens up these opportunities for reorganizing, rethinking our workflows, what we can achieve together, all of that, right? There's a lot in that phrase beyond just digital. Mm-hmm. And that's why we chose virtual, because in virtual reality, in virtual space, there is the opportunity for concurrent collaboration, right? Iterations, all of those get unpacked when you really think about virtual. And sadly, too many people don't realize quite the opportunity you have when you are virtual.
Yeah.
Quick reaction.
I'm curious to know about from Stefania how AEM is. Do you have any planned strategy for publicizing this method in Brazil, or get away with this confusion that they know what VDC is? And
well, this is the first thing. So
starting now.
We have to start somewhere, right? This is the first of many initiatives that we've planned. The second one is just the certification, having the in-company program where we are teaching VDC to our teams, and but we have been talking to some universities here to do the program, the official program as it is taught in Latin America and Europe, in the United States. So and directly to our clients, of course, because they should be the most interested in having their projects led by using VDC approach, right? So by having them knowing what VDC is, we think that this should be a lever of VDC knowledge here in Brazil.
Yeah, I guess we need to somehow, I'm not even sure how the public agencies in Norway started to write into their project call for proposals that VDC as we define it. They were actually quite clear, VDC as defined by SciFi needs to be used. Because they saw, I guess, the confusion and everybody, having their version of it.
Good idea.
And that has had a big impact there, definitely.
So anyway, you are one of the fathers of VDC. Let's see. We have a final question from Flavio Waltz. Yeah, please. It's in English. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting on the industrial projects. I've seen it go both ways. I see in some projects people saying, yes, we already have a great foundation. We, for example, work with 3D for decades and all that. And then it's kind of quite easy to bring the rest of the VDC methods there, elements. And others are very resistant. They said, we have been doing our projects with 3D for a long time. Welcome to the party, Martin, with your virtual concept. But we've been working like this forever. But actually, not really, because you don't do the collaboration, you don't do the metrics, you don't have clear processes, or when you have processes, they are still separated. Design and construction is often separate, right? You have so-called EPC projects on those industrial projects. And the engineering, procurement, and construction are often separated. We had engineers from one of the major industrial engineering and construction companies. I shall not mention them, but they are extremely well known. Come to the VDC program a few years ago, and they said, this is the first time, at least in our experience, and obviously they were very good, experienced engineers and builders. This is the first time we actually talk with each other between engineering and construction. And I guess we should do it more, but yeah. So I've seen it's kind of this like 0 or 1 I've seen on those projects. Like on many projects, it's like they're very They said we have been doing virtual for a long time, and that's it. Not recognizing what they're not doing. And in other cases, they're like, oh yeah, this is the next thing. Let's go. And then they do amazing things. So we will. We're in the middle of working on a case study with a Norwegian team in Norway on an industrial plant that really did just an amazing project in terms of performance.
So thank you for this answer. I guess I can ask Stefania if you have any comments, please, with the final words.
Okay, so thank you again, Sergio and Toledo, for hosting us. Thank you, Martin, for accepting the invitation. It is really important for us, as Toledo mentioned, that VDC gets to be known here in Brazil. I really appreciate you guys as a student, as a professional. So thank you, you three, for your contributions. And I'm really happy to what comes next, right? And I really count on you on our speaking as an A&M professional. I'm really anxious and excited for what's coming next. Thank you again.
Yes, it's my time to say thank you, Martin, because I stayed for a year, 7 years ago, with you and your colleagues.
We miss you.
I enjoy very much the time. Some coffees and some courses and some visits and some workshops and a bunch of things I learned there. Thank you very much. Do you have any comments, any final word, please?
No, I don't want to delay the implementation of VDC by all the listeners.
Okay.
No, but basically, yeah, I hope, thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to contribute to making the projects in Brazil better. And I hope we can continue to work together to bring VDC to Brazil.
We hope to. And I will ask Eduardo to finish this, and thank you for the nice presentation, for the inspiring discussion. And please, Eduardo, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Martin, for your time with us. It was nice to see you again. Stefania, thank you. Shir, thank you for moderating the session. Acho que eu vou falar em português para a nossa audiência agora. I speak in Portuguese for our audience, Martin.
Yeah, please.
Obrigado a todos. Eu acho que foi mais um evento de sucesso. O pessoal tá por aí ainda, já é tarde. Estejam com a gente, acessem as redes sociais do BIM Fórum, o site. Claro, o canal YouTube tem todos os nossos webinars, muito material interessante, e vamos fazer outros internacionais como esses em breve. Ok, obrigado a todos. Bye bye.
Thank you. Okay.